So welcome to our 5th session on building personal resilience, and I do hope that you have the 45 minutes dedicated. You can just put some stuff aside and think about you and how to look after yourself and how to look after your peers. So just before we get going, can I remind you all to stick your phones on mute or the audio on mute, and that's just at the top of the screen where it says audio screen webcam. You should have an audio. You can put yourself on mute there, and that would just be fantastic for everybody else. So what are we going to start with? We're going to start thinking. I always give you a mini tool at the beginning. So I'm going to just give you a couple of minutes to talk to each other, literally 2 minutes, 1 minute each. And I'm going to ask you to think about 2 things that you are appreciative, that you're grateful for, you're thankful for. So for example, I was thinking, what are my 2? I was thinking, I am so thankful for my kids. And I know it's a real big fat cliche, but yesterday 2 of them were getting hold of me and just sending me WhatsApp messages, and one of them was funny and the other one was just wanting to check in. And I was really, really, really appreciative of the fact that they were thinking about me. And the second thing was my husband, because he has a lot to put up with being married to me. We've been married for 29 years now and together for 34. So I'm really grateful for the support that he gives me, and albeit that we have our moments, let's not pretend, we have our moments. So 2 things now that you are grateful for to somebody else, and if you're not in a room with somebody else, just think about them. So there we go. So when you've had a think, if you want to pop anything into the chat box about what you, I seem to have turned myself off the webcam. If you have anything you'd like to share with the group, pop it into the chat box now, things that you are grateful for, are thankful for, so that we can all share a bit. And the reason that we're doing this is because there's been, as you can see, the study on the page has shown that for healthcare professionals and practitioners, that if you are grateful on a repeated basis, just think about a couple of things. Doesn't need to take very long. It does actually have benefit to your mental health, to your resilience. Yeah, I'm grateful, very grateful for my good health too. So thank you, Trinity and Willowbrook, for putting your thoughts in there. Relationships, place of work, friends, jobs we enjoy. Fantastic. So just to welcome everybody, we've got the hospice that I've seen that are noticed that are on today. We've got Dame Louise, St Oswald, St Christopher's, Trinity, St Michael, St Cuthbert, St Luke, Beaumont, Forget Me Not, Martlets, Princess Alice, Birmingham, Ayrshire, Willowbrook. And apologies if I've missed you off, but it is fantastic that you're all on today and all joining in together. I love that we're all this community. So what are we going to do today? If I can make my slides work, there we go. We always come back to this model. So this is a model that we sit all the exercises and the reflections that we do underneath. So just as a reminder, it starts at the bottom with your basic physical health. And then in the basement, you've got the relationships, and that you can accept you as you are. And those have come back as some of the things that we're grateful for. And then on the ground floor, we've got this capacity to discover sense and make meaning and coherence. And today, that's the part we're going to focus on. It's coherence. Now, the opposite of coherence is dissonance. Haha, what's that, she said, you all say. So when you're feeling psychological coherence, you are thinking and feeling the same thing, and it's well known to be connected with health. When you feel dissonance, you have to say one thing when you're feeling another, and that is not connected with mental well-being. So another part of coherence is just knowing that things will work out for you as well as you possibly can expect, because you have optimism in what you're thinking about, and you have a sense of control as well. So this optimism and control part is very, very important to coherence, and that's what we're thinking about today. So we will also think about in the future about some self-esteem, your skills and competencies, which we've been working on as well, and the other experiences that you have. Constructive humour, if anyone wants to share some jokes on the WhatsApp, please do so, because they always make me laugh, and I think we need all the laughter we can get right now. So what have we been doing? Well, we started, just as a reminder, with the Wheel of Life and about the things that were working well for us and the things we wanted to improve. We coached each other using the GROW model. And then we thought about in the next session about energy and how energy impacts resilience and what you wanted more of and what you wanted less of. And last time it was, whoa, strengths. We were looking at strengths, and I do know that that was a ram-packed session, and you might not have got through it all. But the point is with your strengths is this. It is really important to take your strengths back into your energy and your Wheel of Life. Because if you're always working with a sense of weakness, it doesn't do your sense of resilience any good. So, for example, I always have as one of my strengths, I have creativity. So I could bring creativity. How could I creatively deal with a difficult work relationship? Because that will make me feel more resilient. And think about, okay, how could I bring creativity to this to try some things I haven't tried? So that's the beauty of strengths, is how do you take them from one situation and apply them to another? So if you haven't thought about those things, we're not going to do it now, but I do recommend that you could take some time at the end of this, perhaps, to do that, or to go away and think about it for yourselves. So those are the 4 sessions we've done, and this session is going to think about control and proactive coping in order to develop this sense of coherence. So I asked you before we started if you had managed to print off all that list of words and to chop them up. And if you haven't chopped them up, don't worry. If you have chopped them up, superb. But what I'd love you to do is I'm going to give you just 5 minutes now, 5 minutes only. So either singly if you're alone, but if you're in a group, and if you're working offline, you have the time to do all of this, of course. What I'd love you to do is to think about each word as it applies to you personally. Do you have control? Do you have influence in this? Or do you have no control? So control, no control, and or influence. And you're going to arrange them all these words in a line. So at the right-hand end, you're going to put control, the middle is going to be influence, the left-hand end, no control. So for example, you might take feedback. We might say, okay, do feedback as it applies to me. Do I have control over the feedback that I get, or do I have influence? Do I have no control? And if it was me, I would think, well, you know, I can't actually control the words that comes out of somebody's mouth, but I could influence in getting that feedback. So I might put it under the influence heading. Now, some of you might think you have more influence or less influence, and so do feel free to move it up and down that line. All good? So let's take 4 minutes to do that. So by my stopwatch here, it's 14:10. Let's take 4 or 5 minutes. Off you go. So for those of you who have finished, what I'd love you to do is pop again in the chat box any observations that you've now got. So any observations from doing this exercise, what have you realized? Yeah, we've got a lot more. Thank you very much. We've got a lot more in control and influence. We are in control. There's very, very little, there's very, very few things that we can do absolutely nothing about. And that's the beauty. And I think those Brits, what we tend to do is moan about all the things that we can do nothing about. So we moan about our weather, our politics, our traffic, and the constraints that we work under, rather than thinking, okay, this is it. And I was talking to the most amazing person who designs kilims. And kilims, you can't do any curves in those carpets, those Turkish carpets. And she said it's absolutely fantastic because there are so many constraints, but once you have worked out what the constraints are, you have perfect freedom within that framework. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful way of thinking about things. It's something that we hardly ever do, because we think, oh, I don't have this and I don't have that. But actually, when we sit and back and reflect, we have a lot of control, and that's very, very important to remember when it comes to this creating of coherence, that we can act and that we can do things. So this acting and this doing things is really, really important to hang on to, because it impacts about how we cope. Now, there was a fabulous psychotherapist called Virginia Satir who said that the problems aren't the problem, coping is the problem, and that the way we feel we have control influences the way that we cope. So just to run very briefly through all these different coping strategies. So first of all, we've got avoidant coping, and avoidant coping is exactly what it says on the tin. It's when you just go, and I was talking to someone just before I started this webinar who said, I have a lot of problems, I put them in the mental box in my head and I'm just not opening that box. I'll do it next week. So, she said then to me, I'm very, very good with my boxes, I've got several. So that's avoidant coping, and of course we have to do it from time to time. We have to use all these coping strategies. We're not just going to use one. The point of doing this and thinking this through is thinking, when is it appropriate? So she's got no time. It is appropriate right now to have an avoidance strategy because she just can't take, she needs to get on with her job. So when you see the little minus sign after Epping-Jordan, that minus sign means that this was the research which shows that avoidance isn't long-term as successful as some of the other strategies. And Epping-Jordan did some research with cancer patients showing that their prognosis was not so good when they absolutely avoided the question of the situation that they were in. And the same has been shown with people with financial problems, people with dental health issues. So avoidant may be good in the super short term, but over the long term, it's not so helpful. Then we've got maladaptive coping, which is exactly that. And maladaptive coping is doing alcohol, it's doing drugs or illicit substances, let's call them illicit substances, or rumination. So if you are somebody who is anxious, and you'll see this in some of the people that you work with, somewhat highly anxious and introvert, they're prone to more rumination. And rumination is incredibly bad for your psychological health. And rumination is when you take something negative and you churn it over and over in your mind. And we've all done that. And we particularly can do it at 3 o'clock in the morning. But the question is then how we stop ourselves doing it. So it's the worry in advance quite often. So that's maladaptive. Then we've got emotion-focused. And emotion-focused coping is good when you have no control over a situation. So for example, in bereavement, you have no control over what's happening to you. It happens. But it's shown to be less effective over the longer term. And emotion-focused coping is obviously, you look for social support, you look for acceptance, you try to find meaning in your situation, you might daydream. And it's less effective over the longer term because emotion-focused coping reduces, apparently, the perceived control that you have, and that's what that study, Penny Tamaka and Viber, showed. Then we've got problem-focused coping, and problem-focused coping is exactly that. You focus on managing the problem that you have, and it's good because it increases this sense of agency, this sense of control that you have, and enables you to cope practically with an issue. So it's shown over the longer term to be effective and to be more effective. But when you have, there's something that you can do. So you have to be able to take action in all of this. And then finally, we've got proactive coping, which is the one I really want to talk about, because proactive coping has been shown to be, the evidence-based outcomes are the most positive for proactive coping. So what is this famous proactive coping? Well, when you cope proactively, what you're doing is you are expecting and preparing for life's challenges. So you're saying, you're asking yourself this what if. You can see it might be coming down the track, so you set yourself up to manage it. And it gets out of this, am I doing a problem or an emotional focus coping? Because you're probably going to do both. And as I said, it looks most like it delivers results, but it results in personal growth for you too, because it takes you out of your comfort zone and shows that you can do things. And brilliantly, it's most connected with well-being, and that, after all, is what we're trying to deliver. So here are the behaviours that are associated with proactive coping. Right? It's looking for resources, and so getting networked. It's thinking about what if. It's seeing risks as potential avenues to success. And do you remember that I said coherence was connected with optimism and control? So you're leveraging that part. You're saying, okay, well, I could do that, and there might be a risk, but it's a calculated risk, and we could be very successful if we do that thing. But it is about being realistic here. So it's not Pollyanna, and we're going to just make the world a better place. But it's how could I make this particular world in these circumstances a better place? And finally, when things happen, you interpret them in a more upbeat way to try and generate positive feeling. So that's, again, the optimistic part. So those are the behaviours. So what we're going to do for the rest of this session is, which is now 25 minutes, I'm going to ask you to spend 10 minutes in pairs to do this. So last time I loaded you with a lot of work, and this time it's going to be a smaller amount of work. And just to do this exercise and to think through, in what circumstances do you cope proactively, and in what circumstances do you not? And then just think about those two things. So for example, I tend to cope less proactively when I get a surprise, but I cope more proactively when I have thought things through. And what the surprises for me tend to be IT based. So then I start to kind of flap a little bit and become slightly less creative. So a situation where I would like to cope better would be when I get a sudden IT glitch. So how could so if I was working in a pair with you, I would have identified that situation. I would reframe that more optimistically. So I might say, for example, I am not yet managing to cope really well under stress with an IT glitch. So the yet tells me that, well, I could do that rather than I'm not coping. So what strengths or positive beliefs could I take from one situation and transfer to another? So I would think now I could take my creativity, I could have a backup plan, I could do some of the things that I generally do, which I just tend not to do when I'm in an IT glitch. And so what could I transfer, and then who could help me? Well, Marie's not here right now, so I have to say that caused me a little bit of frisson. But I love having Marie around because I know she's not the world's greatest IT expert, but she makes me feel like she would just sort it out. And so then you think about, how do I want to take it forward? So it's those are the questions just to answer. So working in a pair, and if you're by yourself, just think this through. And if you're doing this after the webinar, you can stop the recording now and spend 10 minutes each thinking through the answers to these questions. And when you've done that, just make sure you swap after 10 minutes, and at the end, put in some thoughts that you've had. Any questions, pop me a message. The main thing about proactive, for those of you who are not done, we're going to just continue to swap over now and continue the conversation and think about when is it that you cope proactively and when is it that you don't. And what could you do about that, and which strengths can you bring? So we're going to swap the conversation over. For those of you who are done, we're done. I've just got one more thing to say, which is there's a personality difference here, which is quite interesting. And what we know is that optimists tend to do more proactive coping, which is a huge surprise, and problem-solved coping. But pessimists will go for the emotional-focused coping. And so you might find someone who's a pessimist who keeps coming back, wanting this moral support from you and wanting more input from you. And that sometimes can feel quite draining, in which case the answer to that is to explain to them how you're feeling and what that does to you. because most people don't want to absorb somebody else's energy when they understand it, but it can be something that you could experience. So we've now got another 10 minutes, so for those of you who are done, that's fantastic. Have another conversation, or we'll look forward to seeing you next time.